My name is Lena. I'm sitting here, my laptop open, the cursor blinking on a blank page. I'm a writer, known for thrillers that keep readers up at night. But today, I'm not writing fiction. I'm writing about me, about where I come from. It's not a pretty story, but it's mine. My mom, Claire Valmont, was a big deal in the TV world. Beautiful, charming, the kind of woman who lit up a room. I remember watching her on TV, admiring how everyone seemed to love her. But that was just one side of her. When I was a kid, I never really understood why I had to live so differently. Born with a harelip, I had surgery as a baby. But to Mom, I was a mistake, something to hide. "We can't let people see you like this," she'd say, her voice cold, as she adjusted the medical mask on my face. "You understand, right? It's for your own good." I grew up in a big house, but it felt like a prison. I was always alone, except for the nanny, Mrs. Jenkins. She was kind but scared of Mom. Everyone was. One day, I heard Mom talking on the phone. "Yes, she's always sick. Poor thing. It's a severe immune disease," she lied so effortlessly. I knew then that she was ashamed of me, that she saw me as a burden. My dad? He wasn't around much after the divorce. I heard he was living it up with his new family. I used to imagine him coming to rescue me, but he never did. I didn't go to school like other kids. A tutor came home to teach me. "Keep your mask on," she'd remind me, just like Mom. I turned 10 that year. I was sitting in my room, my only sanctuary, when Mom walked in. She looked at me, her expression hard to read. "Mom, if you hate me so much, why don't you just send me to Dad?" I asked. I needed to know, even if it hurt. She laughed, a harsh, cold sound. "And let the world think I abandoned my sick child? No, we can't have that. Better they think I'm a saint, caring for her ailing daughter." That night, I cried myself to sleep. I was just a prop in her perfect world, a secret she was desperate to keep. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be a secret forever. I often think about how different my life was from other kids. There I was, cooped up in my room, a mask covering half my face, while they were probably out playing, laughing, living. My world was small, confined to the walls of my room, my imagination the only place I could be free. Every morning started the same. I'd wake up to the muffled sounds of the house, slip on the mask that had become my unwanted companion, and sit down for breakfast. Mrs. Jenkins, our housekeeper and my nanny, would bring it in, her face always wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, dear," she'd say, setting down my tray. "Your mother left early for a shoot. She said to remind you to keep your mask on." I nodded, used to the routine. It was always like this. Mom was either absent, busy with her glamorous life, or when she was home, I was just a problem she had to deal with. Some days, I'd try to talk to Mrs. Jenkins, to get some glimpse of the outside world. "What's it like out there, Mrs. Jenkins? Are the flowers blooming?" She'd pause, a sigh escaping her. "Yes, the garden is lovely. I wish you could see it." But wishes were useless in my world. As I grew older, the isolation ate at me. I watched TV, saw other kids my age doing normal things, and it burned. I wanted that. I wanted to be normal. But Mom's voice would always echo in my head, "Normal? You'll never be normal." Sometimes, I'd rebel, in small ways. One day, I left my room, mask off, just to feel a moment of freedom. Mom caught me, her face twisting in anger. "What are you doing? Do you want the whole world to see you like this?" she yelled. Her words were like slaps, each one stinging more than the last. "I just wanted some air," I stammered. "Air? You have a window. Use it," she snapped, pushing me back into my room. "You're grounded. No TV for a week." That night, I lay in bed, feeling the weight of the world on me. I was her secret, her shame. She didn't see me as a daughter, just a mistake she had to hide. My only solace was my writing. I poured my heart into those pages, creating stories where I was brave, strong, loved. Writing was my voice when I had none. One evening, Mrs. Jenkins found me scribbling furiously. She watched me for a moment, then said softly, "You know, you're quite good at that. Maybe one day, you'll be a writer." I looked up, surprised. "You think so?" "I know so," she said, a rare firmness in her voice. "You've got talent, and more importantly, you've got something to say." That stuck with me, gave me a glimmer of hope in my dreary world. But hope was a dangerous thing. It made me want more, made me dream of a life where I wasn't just the girl behind the mask. I started to imagine what it would be like to leave this place, to find a world where I wasn't just a shadow. Sometimes life throws you a lifeline when you're drowning in despair. That's what happened to me one dreary Tuesday, a day that felt as gray as my thoughts. Everything changed with a phone call. The phone, an old relic, hardly ever rang, so when it did, it jolted me. Mrs. Jenkins answered, her face turning pale as she listened. Then she came to me, her voice barely a whisper. "It's your father." My father, the man who had become more a figment of my imagination than a real person over the years, was on the line. I felt a mix of excitement and fear gripping me as I took the phone. "Hey, Lena," his voice was unexpectedly warm. I saw your mother's show. She said you were dying." I closed my eyes, a wave of emotions washing over me. That show. I had watched it too, hidden away in my room. Mom, tears in her eyes, telling the world her daughter was on the brink of death. It was a performance worthy of an award. And it was all lies. "I'm not dying, Dad." "I'm right here," I said, my voice a mix of anger and relief. There was a pause on the other end, heavy with unspoken words. "I'm sorry, for everything. I want to make things right. How about you come live with me?" The offer was like a ray of sunlight in my dark world. Leave? Could I actually leave this house of lies and pretend love? "Yes," I said quickly, without a second thought. "I want to come." The days that followed were a whirlwind. My father came to get me, a man aged by time but still recognizable as the dad I remembered. Beside him was Linda, his new wife, her smile warm and inviting. "We're here for you," she said, her words simple but sincere. It felt like a promise. Mom watched from the doorway as I left, her expression unreadable. She didn't say a word, didn't try to stop me. I looked back once, hoping for something, a sign of regret maybe, but she had already turned away, retreating back into her perfect, false world. Living with Dad and Linda was like breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long. For the first time in forever, I didn't have to wear the mask. I could just be myself, though I was still figuring out who that was. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, a concept still foreign to me, Linda asked, "What do you enjoy doing?" "You know, for fun." I hesitated, unaccustomed to anyone taking an interest in me. "I write," I said eventually. "Stories." "That's wonderful." Linda's eyes lit up. "You should share them with us sometime." In that moment, a seed of hope was planted in my heart. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a place in this new world, a world where I was more than just a secret to be hidden away. Stepping into life with Dad and Linda was like walking into a different world, one where I felt like I belonged, like I was part of a real family, not a facade built on lies. One evening, Dad sat me down. There was a look in his eyes, a mix of concern and hope. "We've been thinking," he began cautiously, "about getting you the best care, to help you move forward." I instinctively tensed up at the mention of doctors. "I'm tired of doctors," I replied, the words coming out sharper than I intended. He nodded, understanding my apprehension. "It's not just about appearances. It's about healing, inside and out. We want you to be happy, truly happy." Linda added softly, "You've been through so much. It's time you had a chance to heal completely." Their words sank in, and I agreed to it. We found a top-notch clinic, and the surgeon there, Dr. Avery, was different from any I'd encountered. He didn't just see a patient, he saw a person. The day before the surgery, he said to me, "Remember, this isn't about changing who you are. It's about helping you see yourself in a new light." The surgery was more successful than I could have hoped. For the first time, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't feel disgust. I saw a reflection that surprised me. I even bore a resemblance to my mother, her beauty that I never thought I could share. But it wasn't just about the physical change. The real journey was the therapy that followed with Dr. Klein. It was about untangling the web of emotions and scars inside me. In one session, I found myself breaking down. "I'm just so angry," I confessed, tears streaming down my face. Angry at my mom, at the world, at myself. Dr. Klein handed me a tissue, her gaze steady. "It's okay to feel angry. But remember, you also have the power to let go of that anger, in your own time." It was a long, tough climb, but slowly, I started to feel a shift inside me. The anger began to ebb away, replaced by something calmer, more like peace or perhaps acceptance. As the days passed, Linda noticed the change. "You're smiling more," she remarked one evening, a note of happiness in her voice. I touched my face, almost in wonder. "Yeah, I guess I am. It feels right." For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like the author of my own story. Not defined by my past, my scars, or my mother's shadow, but by my own strength and resilience. I started writing thrillers under a pseudonym, pouring every ounce of my tumultuous past into them. As I healed and grew, so did my stories. They became more mature, more gripping. By the time I was 28, I was a successful author, my books flying off the shelves. But despite my success, I always kept my true identity a closely guarded secret. Then, out of nowhere, the past called me. Literally. I was at home, scribbling notes for my next book, when the phone rang. Dad answered and, after a brief conversation, his face clouded with confusion. "It's for you," he said, handing me the phone. "Something about a TV show." I took the phone, my heart skipping a beat. "Hello?" "Hi, is this Lena Holmes?" a chirpy voice asked. "I'm calling from Straight Talk, hosted by Claire Valmont. We're huge fans of your work and would love to have you on the show." Claire Valmont. My mother. The words hit me like a wave, leaving me momentarily speechless. I'll think about it," I managed to stammer out. After hanging up, I turned to Dad and Linda, who were both looking at me with concern. It was Mom's show. "They want me as a guest." Linda's eyes widened. "Oh, my. Are you okay?" I nodded, a plan slowly forming in my mind. "I'm more than okay. I think it's time to face her. To show her, and everyone else, who I really am." Dad looked worried. "Are you sure? That's a big step." I felt a surge of determination. I've never been more sure of anything. It's time she knew the truth. So, I called them back and agreed to go on the show. As the day approached, my nerves were a tangled mess, but underneath it all was a steady current of resolve. I was ready to take back my story. The day of the show, Linda hugged me tightly before I left. "You're brave and strong," she said, her voice full of pride. "Remember that, no matter what happens." The studio was a frenzy of activity, lights, and cameras everywhere. And there she was, Claire Valmont, as poised and charismatic as ever. She hadn't seen me yet. A producer approached me, all smiles. "Ready to meet Claire? She's excited to have the mysterious author of The Wolf Trap on her show." I nodded, feeling an odd sense of calm. "Yes, I'm ready." As I walked onto the set, my mother turned, her professional smile in place. Then her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. "Welcome," she said, recovering quickly. "We're all eager to hear about your thrilling novels. Where do you find your inspiration?" I looked into the camera, then back at her. "Well," I began, my voice steady, "let's just say my childhood was quite eventful." The air was thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. This was it. My moment of truth. Sitting across from my mother on live TV, my heart was pounding, but my voice was calm. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment to confront the ghost of my past. "So," my mother started, her TV smile flawless, "your books have been a huge success. What's the secret to creating such spine-tingling stories?" I leaned forward slightly, my hands folded. "Truth is often stranger than fiction," I said, my voice even. "My books, they're drawn from real experiences, real pain." Her smile faltered for a second. "Real experiences? How intriguing. Can you give us an example?" I took a deep breath. "Well, let's start with a girl who was hidden away from the world because of her appearance. A girl who was told she was a burden, an embarrassment." The color drained from her face, her professional mask beginning to crack. I see. That's quite a dark inspiration." I didn't back down. "Yes, it is. That girl was me, Claire. And you are the mother who hid her away." The studio was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. My mother's face was a picture of shock and disbelief. "What are you saying?" she stammered. "Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," I replied firmly. "You're Claire Valmont, the woman who told the world her daughter was dying, just to gain sympathy. The woman who locked her daughter away because she couldn't bear the thought of having a child that wasn't perfect." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked around, as if seeking an escape. The producer tried to intervene. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No," I cut in, turning to the camera. "There's no misunderstanding. For years, I lived in a shadow, hidden away, my very existence denied. But not anymore." I could see the panic in my mother's eyes now. She was losing control of the narrative, the perfect image she had crafted for herself. This is absurd," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "You're making this up. Why would I do such things?" "Because to you, image was everything. And I didn't fit that image," I said, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. "But I'm not that scared little girl anymore. I'm here to tell my story, the real story." The show cut to a break, the tension in the studio palpable. My mother was speechless, her facade shattered. For the first time, I felt like I was in control, no longer a victim of her lies and manipulation. The aftermath of the TV show was like a storm that had been brewing for years, finally breaking. The media went into a frenzy. My phone was ringing off the hook, journalists clamoring for more of my story. And through it all, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, no longer a burden I carried alone. The next day, Dad and Linda were glued to the TV, watching the news coverage. "You've started quite the firestorm," Dad said, his voice a mix of concern and admiration. Linda nodded, her eyes on the screen. "But you did what you needed to do. We're proud of you." I sat with them, watching as my mother's once flawless image was picked apart. There were debates, discussions, people expressing shock and sympathy. Then, the phone rang. It was the TV network. I answered, bracing myself. "We've never seen a reaction like this," the voice on the other end said, a bit frantic. "Your mother, she's been suspended. The show's on hold." I let out a slow breath. "I see." After hanging up, I turned to Dad and Linda. "They've suspended her. The show's on hold." Dad shook his head. I never thought it would come to this. I didn't either, I admitted. But maybe now she'll understand the impact of her actions. The days that followed were a whirlwind. My story was everywhere. People were talking, not just about the scandal, but about my books, my journey. I was invited to interviews, podcasts, book signings. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. One night, Linda sat down with me, a serious look on her face. "Are you okay with all of this, Lena? It's a lot to handle." I thought about it. I am. It's like I've finally taken control of my own narrative. And maybe, just maybe, it'll help someone else out there who's going through their own struggle. As the dust settled, my mother's career took a hit. She became reclusive, shying away from the public eye. It wasn't my intention to ruin her, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Dad hugged me one evening, a bit of sadness in his eyes. "You did what you had to do. And we're here for you, no matter what." "Yeah," I said, feeling a sense of closure. It's time to move forward, to keep writing my story, but on my own terms. After the whirlwind of the confrontation and its fallout, life started to settle into a new kind of normal. I was busier than ever, with book signings and interviews, but there was a sense of peace within me that I had never felt before. I was no longer hiding, no longer a secret. One evening, I was sitting on the porch with Dad and Linda, the sun setting in a blaze of colors. Dad broke the silence. "You know, Lena, I never imagined things turning out this way. But I'm glad they did. You've come so far." Linda nodded, taking my hand. "You're an inspiration, not just to us, but to so many out there." I smiled, feeling a warm glow in my heart. "Thanks. It feels good to finally be myself, to not be afraid of the truth." We talked about the future, about my next book. I was already working on it, pouring my newfound sense of self into the pages. It was more than just a thriller, it was a story of triumph, of overcoming the odds. The next day, I met with my editor, a no-nonsense woman who had always believed in me. "Your story, it's powerful," she said, her eyes scanning the manuscript. "It's going to resonate with a lot of people." I felt a surge of pride. I hope so. It's the most honest thing I've ever written. As the days passed, I found a new rhythm, a balance between my public persona and my personal life. I was still writing, still sharing my story, but I also took time for myself, for Dad and Linda, for the life we had built together. One afternoon, I sat down to write in my journal, a habit I had maintained since I was a child. It was a moment of reflection, of looking back and looking forward. I wrote about the journey, about the pain and the triumph, about the love and support I had found. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of contentment. My past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. I was more than the girl in the mask, more than the daughter of Claire Valmont. I was a writer, a survivor, a woman who had found her voice. As I looked out the window, I realized that this was just the beginning. There were more stories to tell, more chapters to write in my life. And I was ready for whatever came next.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the ninth grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "Alright, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.